Good evening. A few minutes late, but let's call the Committee of the Whole meeting for Tuesday, May 14th to order. Please call the roll.
Alderman Strelchuk is absent. Alderman Talaco. Alderman Meyer. Alderman Hancher.
Here.
Alderman Bach.
Here.
Alderman Parrish.
Here.
Alderman Bratt. Alderman Gebhardt.
Here.
And Mayor Nurbin.
Here. First up, we have approval of the meeting minutes from April 9th. Motion and a second. Any comments or corrections? Hearing and seeing none. All those in favor of approving the minutes, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Minutes are approved. Next, we have a couple of discussion items. First is a presentation of Phase 1 baseline report for a real estate market analysis of the Port Washington Road corridor between County Line Road and Glen Oaks Lane. Take it away.
I just want to remind everyone that back in March, we approved the contract with Redevelopment Resources for the RFP, or for the market analysis, and Kristen Fish-Peterson's here from Redevelopment Resources to give us Phase 1, the baseline report. This is just basically background data. We're not drawing any conclusions on this. This is the first of many phases in this project, so we're just going to have her speak and let us know what she found out about the city of Mequon.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm Kristen Fish-Peterson from Redevelopment Resources, and I'll go through the slides here. You received the baseline report, I believe, in your packet. Again, to reiterate what Jack said, this is just data that we gathered. We're not assuming anything yet or drawing conclusions, but we've done data gathering. We may discover more data as we go along, but the purpose of the study is to provide a thorough documentation of the corridor and discover its highest and best uses from a future land use perspective and identify best opportunities for future redevelopment. So in that vein, bringing that closer, thank you. What we've done is we reviewed internal documents, we gathered, oops, this isn't advancing. If I hit enter? Stuck? Here?
Yeah, but I don't know why that's frozen.
IT's not here today.
You start over.
That's what I do. Turn it off and turn it on again.
It was just frozen.
That's what IT would tell you to do.
It's just, there's
You tried rebooting.
It was stuck on the first slide.
but it's weird though. Why would the screen not be? Actually, what's on the computer?
As long as it's working up there, like a slide presentation like that? Okay, all right. There we go. Sorry for that delay. So as we're keeping in mind the future land use and highest and best. Can you hear me okay? Yeah, that's good. Okay.
You can, yeah.
So as we're keeping in mind the future land use and highest and best use of these properties for redevelopment potential in the future, we gathered internal documents and reviewed them. We gathered and analyzed demographic, geographic, workforce, and economic data. We did a competitive analysis, which we probably will dig in deeper as we go along. And then we're working on analyzing trends locally, regionally, and nationally as they relate to the commercial real estate development. This all culminated in this baseline report. So we'll start with the demographic overview, and we looked at age and population. Your population is expected to grow, but only slightly in the next 5 years. What I like to see about these age charts is that you have a significant young population, age 15 to 24. Your workforce age is not the largest percentage of your population, but you also have a large number of retirees here. So you want to keep all that in mind when you're thinking about everything from housing to business to services, medical, everything. So as far as employment is concerned, the largest percentage of your population is employed in the industry of services, and that category is a large category. It has a lot of things, a lot of occupations in it. Second only by manufacturing, and then the fire categories, finance, insurance, and real estate. When we look at the same employment by occupation, you can see where those services break out. That includes management, business, financial, professional, sales, administrative support, and then other services, which would include hospitality, medical, some of those things. County-wide, you can probably pick out Mequon in these projected employment numbers and the current employment numbers where there is a high level of education and health services as well as other professional services. You can see that the major categories are all growing over the next 10 years, from 2020 when the data was first drawn. This was a chart we got from the Ozaukee County Economic Development Office. As far as educational attainment is concerned, over 70% of your population has a bachelor's degree or higher, so a very well-educated community, which also translates to income. In incomes over 100,000, you currently have about 64% of your total population earning more than 100,000, and by 2028, that'll increase to 70% of the population. Some of this may not be surprising to you, but it is always interesting to me to update the data and make sure it's still tracking the way you always thought it was. Looking at real estate now, we looked at demographics, now we're going to look at the physical real estate. We see this in just about every community that we study. We do a lot of housing studies, but 7,000 of your residential units are single-family detached homes, or one unit detached, which means a single-family home. One unit attached would be a duplex or a single-family home attached to another single-family home. Vacancy trends bumped up a little bit in 2021. They're coming down. And in 2022, it looked like it was about 7%, but we have pretty good anecdotal evidence that vacancy rate is much lower in 2024. Just by the amount of inventory that's on the market for sale or rent. And it's tight everywhere. Median rents, like every other market, have been increasing steadily for the last 5 years or more. And that is another indicator of demand. So we took some time to interview stakeholders in your community. We talked to city staff, we talked to the Ozaukee County Economic Development Office and the chamber staff. We talked to select investors, developers, and commercial brokers, and some business owners. Conversation was, I always know when I've interviewed enough people because I start hearing the same answers. And the conversation went similarly with everyone, but not a lot of people had spent time imagining the future of Port Washington Road. So it gave them a chance to do that when we spoke with them. Many of them thought more residential development would be appropriate on the north end of the study area, and our north end was Glen Oaks. So north of Glen Oaks is where they thought more residential could go along Port Washington Road. Again, these are people's opinions, so we take note of them and then we check them against what we believe to be true about the market. There's a lot of medical, there's a cluster of medical, and there are a significant number of medical specialties within that existing cluster, but that would be something that could even be increased as far as business attraction is concerned, because when someone wants to make medical appointments, they'll typically spend time elsewhere in the community doing other things. So if they're coming here for a plastic surgeon or dialysis or something else, they may have an opportunity to spend more time and money in your community if they're coming from out of town. So people thought that might be an opportunity in some of the existing office space. People always like more restaurants. They also indicated a need for more assisted living options. Apparently there's a long waiting list at Newcastle, which indicates demand. And then we briefly discussed with many of them the opportunity to recruit family entertainment or indoor recreation, things like trampoline parks or rock climbing walls, laser tag, places where people can go to hang out with their family as a group or with friends. We then looked at the competitive analysis. I like Googling images for words and seeing what Google comes up with. So this is our icon for competitive analysis. This data is from Placer AI, and we looked at the comparison of competitive retail nodes with visits greater than 10 minutes in duration. We looked at the Mequon Town Center area, Port Washington Road, Bayshore Mall, and Grafton Commons. And if you see a difference in this chart than the one that was in the report you received, it's because we didn't have a large enough area captured for the Mequon Town Center area, so we requested another point of data from Placer so we could expand that. And so Mequon Town Center's expanded site here is a little different from the report you received. But if you look at this, people spending more than 10 minutes, you have the same number of people coming to the Mequon Town Center as you do Grafton Commons. We believe that the Mequon corridor study area is significantly higher because of the employment and the residential that's there, whereas you don't have the medical base or the office base in the other areas that's as significant as it is on Port Washington Road. We then looked at daily visits by retail node, so by those same areas, and it looks like the town center and Grafton Commons and the pavilions are all tracking along the same path. Bayshore and then the corridor study area, we differentiated between the Mequon pavilions and the corridor study area because we do have a much broader area for the study area and we wanted to look at it as a whole, and we believe that's high because, again, the jobs that are there with the healthcare and the office space and then the residents that live there, whether they're at this assisted living place or elsewhere. And the Bayshore is much higher on the weekends because of the entertainment options that they have there. And then hourly visits, again, time of day, we have more employment in the corridor study area. But it's interesting that the Mequon Town Center expanded site takes a bump in the evening, and that would be the restaurants and I think the dining opportunities that you have. Those are very attractive to people. So as far as the Port Washington Road visit trends, when Placer AI looks at data, they look at visitors as everybody coming from outside the area. And we had that area on the very first slide, if you remember this. We took a quarter mile to the east and the west, and that's what we're calling the study area. So we did capture some residential there. But when Placer AI looks at as visitors, it's people coming from outside the study area. Employees are people who work there, and then study area residents live in the study area. So wondering why these two show a decrease, I think we can probably attribute that to the construction. Just creating less opportunities for people to come. Construction that went on I-43 and the interchange. Again, using those same categories of visitors, employees, and residents, we looked at the top 10 favorite places by those audience types. And this is placer tracking their cell phone data, where they're going and where they're spending their time. So the favorite places include Bayshore, the Marcus Theaters, and the pavilions for all three categories. For just visitors and employees would be Mayfair and Whitestone Station, and so on down the line there. This is interesting as far as the trade area is concerned. For the calendar year of 2023, 100% of the visits were tracked. And it's not super clear on this slide, but way up in Green Bay, there is a concentration of green along with some green and a little red from Chicago and a little bit of red in Madison. So you're drawing people from Green Bay, Madison, and Chicago, the Chicago area, up to Port Washington Road. And I think that's very interesting. Your market is bigger than you think it is. So we indicate those as secondary markets for you. As far as retail gaps are concerned, Placer looks at the number of dollars in the market that are able to be spent in the market. And unmet demand means that there are more dollars in the market by people that live here and have disposable income than there are places to spend those dollars. And these are the categories where there is unmet demand. So you have the money here, you just don't have as many places to spend it. So these would be considered opportunities from a retail recruitment perspective or a hospitality recruitment perspective. And I will say automobile dealers show up on every single chart. I just don't think we can have automobile dealers in every single community and every single neighborhood that we survey, so we don't give that very much credibility. We just don't say you're going to need to recruit some automobile dealers. It's just not. That's a category is kind of a mislabeled category. But you do have opportunities in building materials and supplies, other general merchandise stores, lawn and garden equipment, of course, bars and drinking establishments, and beer and liquor and wine stores, and then automotive parts and accessories and tire stores. As far as what you do have, as far as you have surplus then of these retailers in the market, and this means that there are more outlets for buying these goods in the area than you have disposable income in the community. So that they're successful is they're drawing in income and sales from outside the market. But we wouldn't be recommending to attract businesses in these categories. So the next steps, we will take a deeper dive into the trend analysis and look at short, mid, and long-term opportunities for retail, office, and residential development. We'll look at absorption rates and vacancy rates. We've started to do that already in all of the categories. We'll identify redevelopment sites and work with staff to prioritize these based on their availability, access, size, function, and recommended future use. If we need to access GIS data, we'll be doing that with staff. Otherwise, I think we have a subscription to GIS. We just want to make sure it's showing same results. Any potential future changes to zoning will be identified, and then we'll study the area for kind of regional or potential clustering, identification of transformative redevelopment, and economic drivers. Are there any questions?
Thank you. I found the baseline analysis pretty intriguing so far. So especially some of the, what do we have enough of, what don't we have enough of, that was some of it was intuitive, some of it wasn't. So I think it was off to a good start, but I'd open it up to any questions that any of the council might have. Alderman Parrish.
Thank you. This is a very nice start. Way to do a deep dive in our market. My main caution for you is, and I'm looking at uses and seeing building material and supply, and some of the uses, what it might be natural to recommend, but you may want to cross-check the Uleo Creek corridor, which we recently approved and is also on Port Washington Road, and we wouldn't want, for example, the supplies and things of that nature is meant to kind of be in Uleo Creek, I'm pretty sure. And so that kind of helps narrow down what are the potential categories, because we're not too interested in automobiles, if I'm not mistaken. And I was really interested in that other merchandise, general merchandise stores, and it's really hard to understand what that means, but there seems to be a huge demand there, and it's not restaurants, it's not shoe stores, it's general merchandise stores. And so that'd be interesting moving forward. And then as you look at just the land and the zoning, I think that's partially what we're all really excited about. And staff's given you some great directions, but certainly all of the parcels between Port Washington Road and I-43 have quite a few, well, first of all, industrial buildings, and also a lot of kind of older buildings that were built in the 60s and 70s, and there's just complications with them. A lot of them are condominium sites, so you have like office parks that are split up into condo buildings, and so if you could just look holistically at kind of some of those bigger issues. We also have residential condominiums in this Port Washington Road corridor that are having really similar issues. They're getting really old and not keeping up with maintenance and appearance. And so how do you address like these condominiumized sites is definitely an issue that we've experienced, and you really hit the nail on the head as it relates to the senior housing. And we hear that quite a bit as well from our residents, and it's hard to tackle this issue because it's so market-based, and how do you convince someone to come in and build another continuum of care type project and not just like a memory care. So curious, like, how do we accomplish that? Because we do have a great population that wants to age in place for the rest of their lives here, and I don't feel like they have those options in the future. So thanks again.
This is not a problem that's unique to Mequon either. So we're doing a housing study in Sheboygan right now, and they're over-bedded in skilled nursing care, but they're under-bedded in independent living. So, and the average age of people entering those units has gone from 75 to 91. So people are definitely staying home longer.
Wow. Alderman Bach.
I was interested in that. It seems like people are going to Mayfair and Bayshore. I mean, on one of those slides, it seemed like that. And I was wondering, it'd be interesting to see what are people going to, anecdotally, I hear people that don't hit like clothing shopping. Are people going to Mayfair, to Nordstrom's? Are they going to high-end places that the city of Mequon doesn't have, as far as, get to Alderman Parrish's question, what kind of stores are we missing in the city?
We can dig into that. I've always had a philosophy of that next level shopping experience. So even if you had it here, they'd want to go somewhere else. The people from Madison, Milwaukee want to go to Chicago. The people from Chicago want to go to New York, et cetera, et cetera. But in my mind, it's that next level shopping experience. But yes, if we can, and I did speak with the Brixmore folks at length about their tenant mix, and he said they're doing well. And if there are vacant stores that you can see, they're probably under contract, or they have a lease that hasn't expired yet. So they're working on everything. So.
I had a clarifying question that I thought of when Alderman Parrish was asking you a question. Is the over-under supply, that's not just within the study area, it's all of Mequon, or is it specific to the study area?
Within 5 miles of the study area.
Okay, so it's more regionally.
It's bigger than just the corridor.
Yeah, so
hard
that's
to
an
tighten that down.
unmet need, but we might not meet the need there because of those zoning issues, but we'll have to sort through that, I agree. some things that are on there some things on there we may not want, period, or we may not want exactly there, but it's good to know about them nonetheless.
Yep, and I wouldn't advocate for trying to recruit every one of these unmet demands into the Port Washington Road corridor. We'll get into those recommendations on what makes sense and where we see opportunities to play off of what's already there, so.
Perfect, thank you. Alderman Hancher.
Hi, thank you for your presentation. We had talked earlier about trying to lure like a boutique hotel or motel into that area. Would that be something feasible along that corridor to increase people coming to the area?
Just from what the research we've done so far, I would say yes. You have opportunity there for a new product, which I think would make sense, but we could dig into that a little deeper as well. Mm-hmm.
Alderman Talaco.
One thing that kind of just resonated with me is the map that you showed us, and you said Greater Milwaukee area, however, Green Bay, Chicago, and some of Madison. And typically, I feel like in this area, most kids, when they're going off to college, go to Madison. Green Bay is very popular because of the Packers, and then we have Chicago because they have great schools there too. So those areas. How do you explain that? Is it like a secondary market? As I feel like that's more of like probably kids that are in college or kind of going out on their own for that time.
That's a good
and then
question.
coming back. So I was just curious about that.
Yep, we can look into the data and see if we can tell, what characteristics those shoppers or users have. I'll dig into that. I'll have Dana look into that more.
Alderman Pratt.
Great point about the students,
Yeah.
though.
Got to push to talk, sorry.
Okay, well, I'll just hold on. So, first of all, thanks for the presentation. I really enjoyed it. Sort of what Alderman Hanser was saying sort of reminded me of a conversation we had up here a few months ago about the need to have a diverse sort of stock in our community, like housing, industrial, having an array of sources. So, I see this area as one of these last sort of opportunities to sort of get to sort of work with a canvas of variety. If you go down the whole stretch, there's some rural land still left. There's stuff that's early suburbs. There's the office park era. And then my kid's favorite Halloween store, it's the Spirit store. So there's a variety of things to work with. So I think it behoove us, if we think about this as like a way to provide some diversity and sort of revenue for our community too as well.
Any other questions for our consultant on the baseline analysis? Looking like no. Good job so far. We're excited to get to the next phases,
Thank you.
as you can tell by some of the questions.
So are we. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you. Next, piggybacking off that, we have a discussion regarding proposed updates to streetscaping plans for Port Washington Road between Zedler and Mequon Road.
So we have Luke is here from Harwood Engineering. Many of you may recall we were here about a year ago to discuss the concept plan. So we have now updated the concept plan based on some of the discussion that we had with the council back in March of last year. There was a couple high points that the council wanted us to look at. Basically, one of them was whether we should go with pavers versus the stamped asphalt at the intersections. We should look at reducing features that result in additional maintenance costs. We should eliminate median closures along the Dantes Bay Road intersection, and then review the possibility of implementing improvements north of Mequon Road. So what we did here with this plan is we kind of modified our plan based on a lot of those things that the council was looking for, and we put them in sort of levels to kind of give you a breakdown of what we think a cost would be for each of those levels. So baseline level basically would be just the median work. So there would be just the changes to the medians, turn lanes, things like that. And then we have a level 1, which includes the light fixtures, which would be 28 street fixtures and 52 pedestrian fixtures that are along the corridor. Level 2 includes the median, trees, median, perennials, and decorative concrete. That's the phase where, if you may recall, we had a bunch of annuals and flower pots that really increased the maintenance costs. We removed those from level 3 completely. We did keeping them in level 4 if we need to revisit this in several years, if we feel that there's not enough pop along the corridor, we could add those back. But we felt as a cost issue and as a maintenance issue, that was one of the drivers for removing those. And then finally, level 5 includes gateway neighborhood signage. We have 3 locations on the plan that show some type of signage. We don't know what that is yet. We would probably end up bringing that back to you at a later date. We just identified those locations and determined they were probably the most fitting for signage. So what we're looking for in terms of feedback on this concept plan is, are we going in the right direction? We've tried to meet the requirements. And Luke is here. He'll kind of hit the highlights of all the different aspects of the plan from going from south to north, and then after that we can answer any questions. As a reminder, we did purposely delay implementation of this plan until 2025 because of the conflicts with the I-43 project. So based on our schedule at this time, we're looking at to get this bid out in October with construction of next spring. So I'll leave it to Luke, and he can kind of walk you through the corridor from south to north.
Thanks, Jack. That was a good summary of what we have modified from the previous plans. And I'll just run through these drawings fairly quickly and give you another brief summary of where we ended up with the improvements. So as we move from south to north, on each end you can see that we started off with more of a gateway entry feature into the Port Washington corridor. In the center is where the signage to be determined, and that doesn't really affect the concept or our design. We still can move with the improvements as the base level, as Jack explained, without the signage, and that can be added at a later date. That's the box placeholder there in the rendering. And then as we move north, we get this secondary transition zone that still has some design elements, the concrete banding and the perennial planting beds and shrub beds that are going to be low maintenance as much as possible, along with extra tree plantings in the medians. We followed those themes that the north end has the same progression of design themes. This is the Dodges Bay intersection. This is where we opened up these the turn lanes. They were closed off on the previous plans, and we removed this section of median, so the turn movements would still stay the same. That was one of the bigger concerns. And that is also a place where we removed some of the features, design elements that would move to the level 4, or level 5, sorry. In the center of the corridor, this is where the residential apartments are, and more some of the single-family homes to the east and west. So we have more of a grove of trees, and that's kind of our central point as you move through the corridor. These areas, groves of trees with the concrete banding again, and crushed granite. So again, low maintenance, but adding interest. And then we moving into that transition zone. This is still the second section of the central portion of the corridor adjacent to the residential. And now we're moving north into the shopping area, and we transition again, doing what we can with these medians by adding some trees. They're smaller, and we have the turn lanes that restrict us, but additional crosswalks that would be level 4. And then we make it up to Mequon Road, where we have the signage again denoting the corridor, where we're distinguishing, entering this portion of it. And then the portion connecting to the 43. That would need the approval of DOT, and this is a concept to carry that theme into the off-ramp. And then the next sheet, we added just blow-ups of a typical island, so you could see a little bit more in detail on the dimensions and the spacing. And some of the design intent images at the bottom. And then the light fixtures, cut sheets of the pole that was selected. And then we get into the previous plan set. So quick summary.
So basically, the only thing else I'd like to add is that we did, by doing levels, the base level to level 3 with the elimination of the pots and the annuals, we save about $20,000 a year in terms of maintenance costs. We also did look at going north along the corridor towards, we go a half mile from the TIF boundary per statute, which takes us to about the southern leg of Eastbrook Drive. We didn't really see an opportunity there. Most of the islands there are concreted off. There are about 16 light fixtures that could be replaced, but they're relatively new in terms of compared to the existing ones south of Mequon Road. So we didn't feel that they would get the bang for the buck by going any further north. And you would also have this kind of awkward transition between the old and new, where the TIF boundary allows us to go in terms of the spending. So you would have a kind of an awkward transition location there. So basically what we're looking for is an opinion from you in terms of whether we're on the right track. Are you still preferring the stamped concrete or the pavers in the intersection crossings? Are you acceptable or supportive of additional signage along the corridor? And any other questions or concerns that you may have at this time. As a reminder, this is all be paid for through cash reserves that are in TIF districts 4 and 5, so there's no impact to the general fund with regard to the cost of the project.
Thank you, Jack. Whoa, that's hot. Are there any questions first before we get into the decisions we have to make? Questions or comments? Alderman Gebhardt.
I got a couple of comments. I would just say as I went through that, I was very much in favor with the stamped concrete as we were looking at that as an option. One of the questions I had, as I recall from our last meeting, was just talking about the lighting and trying to get some uniformity down that street, right? Specifically, as we talked about the Donges Bay Road there and having some cutouts in the median, some of that might have restricted the lighting a little bit. Was curious how you solved that problem or how you accommodated for that in your latest concepts.
Well, what we did, and this will require Ozaki County approval, we did kind of leave some smaller islands in place where we can locate the median lights. Now they will have to prove that. I'm not sure what their view is that's going to be, because if you look at the picture on the screen where you can see on both sides of the intersection there's those little small islands. Those would accommodate some of our lights. We did move the one further south, right? Yep, in that location there, and then the one on the north. There's one in that island area. So I think with that we don't have, I would say, optimal light distribution, but we have a lot better than what's out there now. The only way we'd get better distribution out there now would be raising those poles up another 10 feet. I don't think we want to go down that path. I think we're at 25, and going up to 35 gets a little bit too commercial and industrial looking, I think, for me to go that high. So I think we have a lot of a much improved lighting distribution, especially with the pedestrian lighting, but it may not be optimal, but I think it's a great improvement from what's there.
We were able to, the spacing isn't, we were on center for most of the corridor, so we're just a little bit off, but the naked eye won't be able to tell that we have to shift some of those lights. So we still have the rhythm, but the spacing is just a little bit different.
And just to follow up to that, then, as I heard you say, going to the smaller islands, does that pose any problems as we think about winter conditions and snow plowing and, making it more difficult for snow removal or creating potential hazards or additional maintenance because of, snow plows not being able to get in there, if you will, or cutting up the curbs or anything like that?
And if you ask snowplow guy, any obstacles are going to be, they're going to want a clean, smooth surface. There are rumble strips there now, so as far as how they plow, that is different than a normal street. So it'd be a different condition, but there's also an abnormal condition currently. So it would just be, and it's not in the lane of travel, it would just be a spot where they'd windrow snow into it.
And there were areas that we couldn't fit landscaping in. They were just we thought they were too narrow, they wouldn't survive. In fact, one of them we looked at was on the screen where the old Centennial was. We now closed off that intersection with the new Medi Spa, so that's coming in off of Donjas Bay. So we looked at trying to maybe do something to extend that turn lane all the way to Donjas Bay Road, but it's just not wide enough and it wouldn't accommodate any landscaping, so we just left it open at that point.
Got any more questions?
One other
Keep going, yep.
follow-up. Concern that I had last time we met was that that Clark Station on Donjas Bay, and coming in from the south side there and closing off that boulevard, because coming in off of Donjas Bay from the south, it gets very backed up at a stoplight, and it's very difficult for any car coming from the south that might be coming on the Donjas Bay to get in there to not block up that intersection. So have you accommodated that within these designs and this concept adequately?
It really doesn't, from what we did there, it doesn't really change much compared to what's out there now. We just added that one small island, but everything else is similar to what's out there now. I mean, yeah, originally we had to extend it the entire way, so you blocked off that access point, but now we open those back up. I mean, if it was a new development, I don't think we would allow 3 curb cuts on that development and that close to the intersection, but it is what it is. It's there now, and so we're just trying to make the best way we can, but we didn't make it any worse. I think we kept it about the same as it was under the current conditions.
Alderman Talaco.
It looks beautiful. I don't have as many technical questions. I'd like to drive through the road just to kind of see that. But the stamped concrete, it's beautiful.
Stamped asphalt.
Or
actually.
asphalt?
Yeah.
It's beautiful. My concern, and maybe it's a mom brain, that it looks like it could potentially be a walking path. Like, I'm sure I'm gonna find somebody that thinks that they can walk around that little median. So is there like a different way to size that, or to make it less appealing as far as being a pedestrian way to walk around?
Or you're talking about the concrete around the planters? That's different than the
that's
stamped
different,
asphalt. The stamped asphalt, I think, is for the crossings. Yeah.
We don't want to encourage people walking.
Yeah, I think as those trees mature out there, there'll probably be less ability for anybody to walk on there. Maybe it just looks a little misleading now with the size of the plantings on there. But we created that as a nice buffer edge, and we felt that if anything closer, any plantings closer to the road would probably die because of the salt or the snow plowing issues. So I think we can look at that a little closer to see if there's any concern over that, what the width of that is, and to see if we can narrow that down a little bit. But it's something we never really thought of, so thanks.
Yeah, and in this condition where we have the lawn, and it seems less inviting, more decorative, but there are certain conditions where we got too narrow with the existing islands that you couldn't fit both elements in there.
Well, I've seen it all, and to me, I'm like, I could see somebody that would be walking out there not using the control lanes. I know the speed limit's 35, but most people go 10 over. It's just, I want to make sure that we're not creating, with this beauty, creating something adverse as well.
Alderman Parrish.
Thank you, Mayor. This is in my district, as well as Alderman Gebhardt, so that's why we have a few more opinions. Very pleased with how far we've come. And if you could just pull up section 7 while I'm talking. But there's a few areas that I just wanted to draw attention to and would be interested in more information. First one he's pulling up is section 7, and I've noticed I have kids that go bike through this intersection, and out of all the intersections in Mequon, naturally it feels the most unsafe. And so I guess I have a 2-part question here. One relates to potential technology that wondering, should we be discussing technology ultimately here? Kind of like what we did with the interurban trail. I know that wasn't the original scope, so I don't want the consultant or staff to feel like, oh, we forgot technology. But now that we've kind of have this beautiful picture, I mean, there is this ongoing safety issue, and there are new technological advancements like noisier, like beeping signals and lights, things like that, that especially, I'm not advocating that for at each intersection in this study area, but I'm just wondering, should it be in the Mequon Road intersection? And should we have some kind of allowance placeholder for technology? I don't want to hold up the process, but should we be saying something like 250,000 for, maybe we need to update a couple of the stoplights and just make them more pedestrian friendly. So the technology piece is really where I was going with that. Part two is the placement of the sidewalk. If you could just confirm, it looks like you've actually switched the location of the sidewalk relative to where they were. So like cars don't actually have to go drive over the pedestrian walkway to turn right. They actually have to stop now before the pedestrian walkway. When I'm looking at your drawing, that's what I'm seeing. But I've noticed that to be an issue now with the current situation on the ground, is that the crosswalks kind of don't jive with the way cars are turning. And in order to see, the car has to pull over the pedestrian lane and then make the turn. So I apologize for explaining that a little confusing, but there's something about the sidewalks or as the crosswalk as they are today that it feels problematic that you may have addressed on your drawing here. I'm just confirming that.
Yeah, those crosswalks were placed in, it's pretty tight and there's a lot of stuff going on, like you
Yes.
said, in that intersection. But they were placed to avoid the existing medians and connect into the ADA accessible ramps that are on each corner.
Mm.
So as far as going, we were past the stop points of each lane of travel. As you can see, like up here, there's the stop bar to the north. So we are past that. I'll have to verify on the east side because this is getting improved. I think this sidewalk is based on plans that,
Yeah, we based it on the Mequon Road changes that the I-43 project is contemplating. And so I guess the biggest, I think we like your ideas, but the biggest caveat is that that's a WISDOT controlled intersection, so we're gonna be at their mercy again. And it doesn't always go the way we like it to go, or it takes a little bit longer time, so that may cause some issues with timing on the rest of the project, but.
Yeah. Okay, well, if you could just double check those walkways, and if there's anything that can be done. My final, if you could go to section 5. I brought this point up before. There's a We Energies substation in my district, right at Winding Hollow and Port Washington Road. I do get comments from my residents about this. I got a call today about they're not taking great care of the property. I'll take that up separately with staff. But if We Energies is not going to do anything to beautify this property, and I guess I should ask the question first, has We Energies offered to do anything? But if not, my request would be that our plan show essentially a line of trees in the whole right-of-way around their property. And let's just fence them in with trees and improve the appearance of the corridor and satisfy all the residents around there. If they want to make it into like a pocket park and landscaping and take good care of it, that'd be great with benches and a place for dogs. But they don't feel like a partner on this particular site. And so my thought is let's get some natural barriers to shield it in. I'd really like that to happen.
Yeah, I think they're hesitant to do anything on their property, so it would have to be off-site. So I think we can look at that, but yeah, I don't think they're.
So the request would be like right after the we can build right after the sidewalk, right? Or put trees in
I
the
remember
right of way?
looking at that right away is a little strange over there, so I'll have to revisit that because the right of way I think actually goes further into the road than it shows.
It does,
so
but that was a mistake that was supposed to be corrected,
Yeah,
and
and
it still hasn't been corrected.
yeah, so we'll have to
So
look at
We
that.
Energies owns part of Port Washington Road, according to the GIS.
Yeah, maybe we should ask them if they'd deed that back to the city, have a proper road right-of-way reservation, so we have a little bit of room to do some stuff. I agree, that site's ugly. Let's just be
Yeah.
honest. It's anything they could do would be a benefit.
And show it on our plan, just so it's part of our plan as well, the drawings. And that's what I have to say. Thank you to my colleagues for listening.
one point to that too is we have to, depending on how much room we can get, there's all those power lines along that edge too. Not that we couldn't do evergreen trees that are shorter, but anything huge would be restricted by those power lines.
Excellent points. I'm going to bring up something real quick on slide. It's on packet page 28. The intersection of Donges Bay and Port Washington Road. I seem to recall the last time we talked about this topic, which has been a number of months. We talked about perhaps entertaining the idea of making a right turn lane from Donges Bay going to northbound Port Washington Road. And that site, that building has now been torn down. I believe we even talked about it, Planning Commission, making sure they didn't put anything on that corner so that we'd have room to do it someday. It just doesn't look like we've reflected any of those thoughts here. I will acknowledge there's one utility pole that would need to be moved to make that happen, but that is a pain to make a right-hand turn there. In fact, I've seen people just this last week cut through the vacant parcel, through their vacant parking lot, to cut around the corner, because now you can see past it with the building gone. When you're waiting for the light there and there's someone who wants to turn right, there's not enough room to do it. It'd be a real benefit to the intersection if we could somehow make it possible.
Yeah, as part of the Medi-Spa approval, they did dedicate right-of-way there, so we have the right-of-way. I know we talked about a sidewalk going from the Donges Bay intersection up to the bridge, because there's a sidewalk that stops at the top of the bridge. I don't remember the discussion with the turn lane, but I think there should be enough room to do that, but we'll have to look at that a little closer.
Yeah, we definitely talked about it at the committee of the whole, and then this item was on, that Medi-Spa was on Planning Commission just a month or two later, and it came up in passing. I would, if anyone wants to go check the tape, I'd welcome them to verify that my memory's correct, but I'm pretty sure it's correct.
It's a very tight intersection. I mean, it just feels very tight.
Yeah, it's tight, and now that we've removed a building from where we should have a road right of way, it'd be nice to take advantage of it if we could. It'll be impossible on the other side of the road, but that's not as much. No one needs a left turn lane. That's the problem now, is a lot of people are turning left and you can't get around them. So that's my only comment. Otherwise, this looks great. I think you really did a good job listening to all the other feedback except for the turn lane. Any other comments on the body of work here? What are the decisions we need?
Any decision on that crosswalk, either the stamped asphalt, the pavers, or nothing? I mean, I guess it's always
So
an
it's
option.
nothing stamped asphalt or pavers.
Yeah, those are the options we're asking for. I mean, there is a possibility to do stamped concrete, but I think the same issue that we had with the pavers is with the stamped concrete, is that you're going to get a bump there because of the different materials. So
Yeah.
the stamped asphalt does a little bit better job of alleviating that transition.
So maybe we can eliminate one. Is anyone in favor of doing nothing? Just show of hands. Okay, that one's off the table. So stamped asphalt or pavers. I heard a couple people looking at stamped asphalt. Stamped asphalt, show of hands. Well, there we go. We don't even have to ask the other question.
And the other question was regarding the signage. Did you want to pursue signage in those locations and bring that back at a later date in terms of some design options?
How do people feel on signage? There's just a nondescript obelisk there now, but
Yeah, we purposely left it pretty blank.
something to denote the area similar to what we talked about for town center. So show of hands in favor of some sort of signage. Looks like we've got a majority, if not a unanimous support for that. So that basically gets us options 1, 2, 3, and 5, and option for the level 4 will be for another day if we decide to go for it,
Correct.
just so in case anyone's following along. Okay, are there any other decision points we need to make?
I think that's good.
Well, that was remarkably easy. I think it's due to a good report and a good presentation, so thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That brings us to one ordinance we have for discussion, ordinance 2024-1661, an ordinance amending chapter 58 of the Mequon Municipal Code in connection with clarifying certain definitions, design standards, and location standards for residential development within the city's town center and arrival corridor zoning districts.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening. I know if you look at the text amendment and all the redlining, it probably looks a little bit more overwhelming and complex than what it really is. One of the first steps we did was just try to clean up definitions and meanings behind certain terminology, just so it's consistent. I think when we did the 2017 text amendment, some of those, some of the precision, I guess, of the definitions of those got a little bit lost. And so we have a proposal in the town center that's been working with us, and some of those inconsistencies came to light. So we wanted to correct that. The other thing, there's two major, I guess, policy changes for the council to discuss tonight. The arrival corridor district, which is essentially from Bunch Rock to Wauwatosa on the south side of Mequon Road, does not allow a developer to request a project that includes more than a total of 16 units. It's regardless of the style, regardless of the type of structure it's in, there's just no a legal path forward for someone to ask for more than 16 units. So prior to 2017, you could ask for more than 16 units, you just needed to apply for a PUD. And there still is density requirements. The base zoning calls for 16 units per 1 acre. So even if someone were to come forward through a PUD process, we would be measuring the project against that density. PUDs are rezonings, so ultimately the Planning Commission and Common Council have total control and authority. You don't need to make findings should you not like the planned unit development or that rezoning proposal, and you could deny it. Staff's of the opinion that we should continue to allow the opportunity for developers to come forward with projects that include more than 16 units. And if we find that it's of public benefit and it's of high quality design, the city may be compelled to approve it. So that's the first text amendment. The second is that when we were presenting that first one to the Planning Commission, we had a member of the public come forward who is interested in doing a project. It's Lakeside Development. They own the vacant piece that's in front of the reserve. Between like Gearox and the memory care facility. That zoning district, the arrival corridor district, as well as the town center zoning district, requires that if you have a parcel that fronts on Mequon Road, you need to provide at least 75% of the ground floor of that structure to be commercial. So the Planning Commission discussed that, asked staff to bring back the following month some additional analysis regarding that. Staff essentially recommended, and the Planning Commission approved, that we maintain that 75% commercial ground level use in the town center zoning district. Again, this is just for parcels that front on Mequon Road. But that we could eliminate it for the arrival corridor district. It doesn't mean that if there is commercial demand and a market for additional commercial space that a developer could not present that. But a couple things have happened since that original language was in there. One, we've changed the style of residential development that can happen in the town center district. You can no longer do a 3-story structure. You essentially have to contain it to 16 units per structure. They can only have ground level entry, so you can't even have a second story entrance to the unit. I think that style of residential development is more consistent with what we see in terms of residential on the Mequon Road corridor. In addition, we've had a lot of development occur in the town center zoning portion of the neighborhood, and there is a lot of ground level commercial tenant space that is white boxed, meaning it's built, it's ready for tenants, but there are no leases or no tenants, users in those locations. If there is the attraction for some additional commercial uses, we would prefer to see them filled up in those existing tenant spaces, and we believe that there's some synergy to the concentration of those commercial uses in that existing town center zoning district where the other commercial is. I would also add that, consultant documents that go back to the early 2000s, and there was a number of them that were done for this particular neighborhood before we implemented zoning, before we implemented the TIF district. All of those documents will tell you that the additional residential units is what's going to drive the desired commercial use in the neighborhood. So we don't necessarily see it as a negative to release, I guess, some of that ground floor development on Mequon Road for individual townhome and walk-up units. One of the things we did add, though, is some design standards, if the council is supportive of this text amendment, to make sure that we're creating some space between the public sidewalk and street and where the front yards of these individual dwelling units at the ground level are, so that there's a little bit of enhanced privacy and a clear delineation between what is the public space and what is that private residential space. If there's hesitation with that, we did suggest to the Planning Commission that instead of having a percentage, that you would only require a minimum of a 1,200 square foot commercial use in those types of structures, again, in the arrival corridor district. And that's based on the sizes of the commercial uses that we allow in that zoning district. Ultimately, the Planning Commission didn't opt for adding that requirement in and recommended removing that standard for the arrival corridor district. So this is on the Common Council agenda for ordinance action tonight. We wanted to make sure there was a full understanding of these text amendments, and if there's any questions that anybody has before you take action tonight, I'm happy to address those now.
All right, any questions? Alderman Meyer.
Back when back in I think it was 2016, you were referencing the rival corridor with the 16 units inside there. We specifically had that so that there would be no ambiguity on, we would only allow the 16 units. And that's because we wanted to make sure that we pushed everything more towards the center and out in the rival corridor. And so we wanted to make sure at that time that, like I said before, that should be large enough units because that's an arrival corridor. We don't want to have anything that's bigger than that. During it now, the flavor of the Common Council may have changed during that period of time, but I still think that it should be just left at the 16 units and not worry about the rest of it. I mean, this kind of seems like it's stitched together like the state budget is when the governor gets it and crosses one thing out and adds another thing to
Well,
it.
I think the distinction is that 16 acres didn't contemplate any measure of the size of the parcel.
It's still, you're
Still
not
16
allowed
units
to
per
do
acre.
more than 16 units per a structure. That's still in here. But it just, what's precluded right now is that you couldn't do multiple buildings on a larger site with 16 units. You'd only get one structure with 16 units, or if you did 4 structures with 4 units in it. The challenge could be that in some of the larger sites, or what you could do is actually subdivide parcels in order to achieve the number of units that you really want, and then we're not necessarily getting a cohesive master planned site. There could be, in some circumstances, a circumvention to that in the arrival corridor district, particularly those parcels on Wauwatosa, on the east side of Wauwatosa, south of Mequon Road. So they're 2+ acre parcels. If somebody assembled all of those, we would get a master planned development based on the density of 16 units per acre, still control no more than 16 units per structure. If not, and we don't afford for that opportunity to at least bring that proposal forward, someone could circumvent the code by subdividing each of those parcels and coming in one by one by one, and they wouldn't look cohesive or connected. And that would be my concern.
Well, in my personal opinion side of that, I don't want to see multiple 16-unit apartment buildings set up over inside of that area. And I don't think the residents inside that area would go along with that either for it. So unless we take it out, and the rest of this seems fine, but unless we take it out, I won't be voting for this. And I may make a motion then to do that, to take that section back out, leave it the way it was. And as a matter of fact, I'll make that motion, that it stays the way it was, to the maximum number of dwelling units allowed per development is 16 units and not buried through a PUD.
I'll second it.
Motion and a second. Alderman Parrish.
Thank you. I'm trying to, I understand what the prior council was getting at, and you're trying to get at this uncontrollable growth in apartments. And I certainly could see this accelerating that process. I know as alderman, I get tons of calls from developers about this corridor, and I try to manage their expectations that we're not looking for high density apartments in that area. We do want residential, though. I think we all agree on that. We want people and units to support our vision for the center of town. My concern about the path, the motion, is that I mean, you could have like someone who assembles 5 acres, and you're going to have 16 units on there under that philosophy. And I think ultimately you're just ending up with highly inefficient uses of land. You're going to get some really odd structures, and ultimately we control it with the PUD. So, I mean, I trust the Common Council to, if we're trying to avoid apartments completely, we just need to strip it out of there and be really upfront and honest with developers that we don't want apartments there. The part that I was really in favor of here was, you know, I do think the first floor commercial was, in a sense, not viable from a market perspective, and it was holding back development. And it would be a lot of empty storefronts. So when I was at that planning commission meeting, I did say, yeah, I don't quite understand why we have this requirement. It should be something much smaller, like 25%. And then I think it came back, it's all stripped out, right? It's not even required unless they want it there.
It's still required in the town center zoning.
Yeah, but not
just
in
the
arrival I'm talking about. So it's fine. I think we're all in agreement about some of that stuff. It's the density of apartments, which that wouldn't change. I mean, we're still targeting 16, you know, the same density, right?
Correct. Same density, same limitation on the number of units per building, and the design standards, again, essentially require that these be individual walk-up, first floor, townhome, row house styles. You will no longer, the code does
Yeah.
not allow
These aren't the same
apartment
style.
corridor entry structures.
These aren't the same higher density 3-story structures with, you know,
Yeah.
commercial on the ground floor and then 2 levels of apartments above them. That's not even possible at all anymore.
Correct.
So
In
th-
either
th-
district.
These will be more like those side-by-side styles that are along, I forget which road it is. It's not west.
Like
and-
Bunch Rock,
Bunch
Spur
Rock, yeah, it's
16's
Bunch
got the
Rock, yeah.
townhomes, yep.
Alderman Bach.
Not that it matters, but just since you mentioned it, and I wasn't at that planning commission meeting, but the developer, I think you said Lakeside, was interested in that parcel. Were they, after this discussion, were they satisfied, or what happened with that?
Yes, Lakeside Development was the one who spoke at the Planning Commission meeting to introduce the topic. I did meet with them in advance of bringing the text amendment back and had some conversations with them about it. They made the point that even if you maybe imagine like a small coffee shop, like in the Arrival Corridor District fronting on Mequon Road, kind of the question of wouldn't the consumer rather be maybe at the existing coffee shop, Collectivo, where there's a lot more vitality, a lot more, other retailers, other services around, and it's not that really far of a walk, and that's actually what we're encouraging. So, some of the things that he contemplated of if the requirement was in there would likely be duplication of services that we already have. And not only the customer, but the city probably would want the concentration where the, compact development is already happening.
Got it. So if you, maybe Mayor, could simplistically say that we've got the motion on the floor and how that differs from what the proposed ordinance was, so I'm clear on that.
Well, the motion on the floor would be to amend what's here to put it back to 16 units per site, period, regardless of size. I personally think there was a little bit of a oversight back when that was passed, because if you have a 3 or 4 acre site, you're going to get 16 units and that's it. I think that what we're doing here is trying to allow for a little more residential development, more like what we see along Bunch Rock, where it's those nicer side-by-side units that are less dense inherently and not require first floor commercial we probably don't need because it's hard to support the existing commercial we have now. There's a lot of empty storefronts that haven't filled up yet. There just aren't bodies to put in the stores in many cases. So that's my view on it, and generally what we talked about at Planning Commission. I think this keeps the same density standards of 16 per acre and gives us a lot of control in the process. And to your point about slowing development down, I think that first floor commercial piece is kind of one of the things that's causing it not to happen as fast. There's just not demand for it. So you get these sites that look unfinished, or maybe in some instances unkept. Alderman Meyer.
I agree with the first floor, retail not being inside there. I mean, I think that is, something that we thought of originally was going to be, the whole arrival corridor was a little bit different. It was going to be kind of the old town type of store in the front, and then in the back or on top having the residential inside there for it, so we'd have a nice little look along the way. That has morphed into a totally different thing from what the original idea was for the corridor. But the fact of the matter of having it on, doing it on 1 acre, that's pretty dense also if you take a look at that. Having 16 units on 1 acre, that's the minimum 1 acre inside. That's pretty tight. I think and one of the reasons why why we did this beforehand is to slow down the growth of the apartments on it, because we felt it was better inside of the actual town center itself, but also to the fact of that giving developers a clear understanding of what was expected inside of that area, instead of people coming forward and spending time and money and and doing plans and bringing all this stuff forward to have the common council say, yeah, that's not what we want. So that's the reason why we put it down here as the 16 units, and that's what you can get during that area. And I still think we'll have a number of people coming up to take that. The comment from Alderman Parrish about the fact it look a little weird with somebody puts together 5 acres and it has one 16-unit apartment on it. I mean, that's that's the developer doing that, putting that together. I don't think anybody would do that, as long as they know that they'd only be able to have 16 units outside of that. I'm not saying it wouldn't happen, but I don't think that you would see a developer doing that, putting together all those parcels and then just doing the 16 inside of it. So, my comments.
I think the natural consequence of that is we'll vote on the amendment here in a second, but if we pass the amendment, we'll see a lot of people buying parcels and doing CSM to divide them, and we're going to get it anyway. But it might be a worse product in the end because it's not necessarily going to be cohesive. Alderman Parrish.
That's exactly what I was thinking. I mean, I just think the amendment needs a little more something to it if we're really going to consider it, because anyone would just do the CSM split and keep splitting up down sites if you're only going to allow that type of density. So you need some kind of, floor on this.
It's almost a false constraint because it's so easy to get around with the CSM.
Yeah, there's such an easy loophole as a developer that I just question what we're accomplishing with this, and if we really don't want that constant subdividing of smaller sites, we need to address that somehow, and I don't even know how you would. I can't come up with any language on the spot. But 16 units for 1 acre is, they're just going to keep splitting up bigger sites, and it's going to keep getting smaller and smaller, and it's incohesive. Everything Director Tollefson said was correct on this point. And it doesn't mean that you want more apartments by voting against the amendment and in favor of this. We're following through on the vision and trying to have a cohesive development. The code is not correct as it's written. It doesn't jive with the development community, and if we don't want apartments there, we need to take it out of the code. So that's what I'm saying.
Any other comments on the, we have a motion and a second on the amendment unless someone votes to amend their amendment. Any other comments on that? Alderwoman Talaco, sorry.
Do we want to see more apartments in that area? And are the apartments that are currently further down in the district full and thriving? I don't know if I agree with that transition, and maybe I'm not completely understanding this, but I don't wanna see 16-unit apartment type structures at all in that area. I think that they're doing a massive job on these row houses already. I don't think they're selling like they thought they were gonna be selling.
Well, these aren't the pocket homes. That's different. The row houses are rentals. Just want to make sure we're clear what we're talking about. These aren't the pocket homes at the back of Foxtown. Not those style.
So is there a way to amend this to allow for less than 16 apartment units?
Are you asking about apartments or are you asking about townhomes? And the distinction for us would be, you know, you can't have a second story unit on its own or a third story unit on its own. The code now limits you to 2 stories. And if you have 2 stories, it's 1 unit that's 2 stories. And you have a front door at grade. So the second story is just a 2-story dwelling. And so they're just really row houses or townhomes attached to one another.
And what is the acreage that's required to have one townhome?
Well, in the town center zoning district, your minimum lot size is a 1/2 acre. In the arrival corridor, your minimum lot size to propose any type of development is 1 acre. And we don't allow single family. Like you wouldn't be able to have a single family home.
No, 1 acre can hold a 16-unit townhome unit building. But they're all side by side. They're not over-under style.
They're not stacked units.
That's what it is now.
That's what it is right now.
There's no more over-under apartments like we have. What we saw in the first 3
Even
phases.
in the town center.
Yeah.
Well, if I saw the townhomes, that'd be okay. I'd like to reduce the number to like 8.
Well, that would be, we'd have to come back with a completely different text amendment because there are so many intricacies to the zoning that we'd have to run through all of that. Remember too that there are a lot of technical standards that also control massing and density. So there's open space requirements. There's FAR, which means the amount of floor area ratio you can do based on the size of the lot. That's a way of controlling the massing of a structure. We even have that in our commercial districts to make sure the buildings don't look bigger than ultimately the size of the lot. So there's a lot of other design controls. So we'd have to look at all of those things if that's the direction.
We have a motion on the floor to amend what's before us with, what's the exact motion? Striking section.
The motion was actually just to make it nice and simple, to keep the arrival corridor designation, number 3, the same the way it was, no changes.
So just no changes.
Correct. It just says the maximum number of dwelling units allowed per development is 16 units and may not be varied through a PUD.
Okay, that's the motion on the floor. Are there any other proposed changes to that motion, or let's just vote on that motion and see where it goes? Seeing none, we have a motion and a second to keep the 16 units as is with no modification whatsoever. Let's call the roll on that one.
Alderman Talaco,
Aye.
Alderman Meyer,
Aye.
Alderman Hancher,
No.
Alderman Bach,
No.
Alderman Parrish,
Nope.
Alderman Bratt,
No.
Alderman Gebhardt,
No.
and Mayor Nurbin.
We're in committee of the whole. No, motion fails. Okay, so we have the proposal as drafted before us again. Is there a motion or a second on that, or another motion for another different amendment?
I would just move to approve the resolution as proposed.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, please call the roll.
Alderman Meyer,
No.
Alderman Hancher,
Aye.
Alderman Bach,
Aye.
Alderman Parrish,
Aye.
Alderman Bratt,
Aye.
Alderman Gebhardt,
Aye.
Alderman Talaco,
No.
and Mayor Nurbin.
Aye. Okay, we have the Committee of the Whole planning calendar. Let's skip that as we're well past the appointed time to start the next meeting. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We'll take a quick 3-minute break so people can do what they need to do, and we'll be back at 8:01.